Okay, folks, here we are, and welcome to Module 1 of the PIG method, which I'm calling Mind Reading Your Market, because that's what it's all about, and because good old Charlie Xavier there is bald like I am, so I feel a certain kinship to him. Now, there is a lot in this first module. And it's pretty dense. I'm basically going to try to download how I look at the world and how I look at people directly from my mind into yours, which could be a little bit scary. But if everything doesn't make sense right away, if you feel a little bit overwhelmed, don't worry, just go with the flow, and I'll do my best to connect everything together in a way that makes sense as we get deeper into the course. Or of course, there will be some Q&A stuff as part of this course as well. Either you'll get to ask me questions or some other people will, and you'll be able to kind of feel like you are them. Also, you can of course always watch these videos over and over again. You should be able to get access to the slides as well, but take your time. It's a lot. You're going to be drinking from the fire hose here, and I don't want you to feel too overwhelmed. Also, if I stumble over my words a little bit, please forgive me. I have ADD, bipolar, and low self-esteem. So all of these things combine to make it difficult for me to perform under pressure like this. In this module, I am going to explain to you how pig stories unhook the rational mind and multiply conversions, why nobody is special and that's awesome, how to use the 7 deadly sins to discover the deep irrational desires of your market. I'll show you how to play the empathy game I created so you can figuratively, though hopefully not literally, crawl into your market's skin. And by the end of this module, if I do my job right and you do yours too, you will understand your market better than they understand themselves, and hopefully you will have gained a certain level of self-awareness about yourself as well, because kind of key to the PIG method in my personal experience is understanding how to use your own emotions, your own background, your own triumphs and tragedies in order to put yourself emotionally into the same place as your market, as your avatar, so they feel like you understand them, so they feel like you empathize with them. So why is the PIG method you're going to learn in this course so powerful in the first place? Why is it that when I first started using this method, it dramatically increased my own conversions and was pretty rapidly ripped off by a whole lot of people, some of whom did it right and a lot of people who did it wrong because they didn't understand the empathy component of the whole course? So here are the main components of the PIG method. First, we create a primal, psychologically constructed story where everything that happens in the story is there to create a specific emotion in the prospect's mind and heart. When we get into Module 2 and I show you the different story beats of a pig story, you will notice that every single one of those beats, those things that happen in the story, are there for an emotional reason. Next, we use emotional and subtly hypnotic language, which I'll go into later, so as to unhook the rational mind of the prospect so they slide down the greased chute towards the sale, because the last thing we want anybody doing while they are watching one of our VSLs or reading some of our copy is thinking about what's going on. The rational mind is kind of the enemy. Luckily, it's pretty easy to turn off. And then we're going to position the product and the offer as the only way to achieve the big dream that has been hiding deep in their heart, even if they aren't aware of it themselves. And of course, in the next video, next 2 videos, we're going to talk about how exactly you discover what people really, really want deep in the darkest parts of their hearts that they will never admit, not only to you, but to anybody at all. Ooh. Anyway, using all of those 3 components of the PIG method, you put them all into a wood chipper, which is actually backwards here, but I just thought it looked better this way. And you get money. You get massive conversion boosts for your letters, your VSLs, your sales letters, your webinars, your advertorials, your online dating profiles, and also your sexting game. Of course, I am Chris Haddad, Chris Mr. Moneyfingers Haddad, Michael Fiore, the world's first and perhaps only sexting millionaire. Sexting Bought My House may well be the name of a book that I write at some point in the future. Anyway, what does PIG mean in the first place? And if you don't know this, I wonder how you got into this course. But anyway, PIG means punched in the gut, because we want our pig stories to cause a visceral, emotional reaction that connects with the market's deepest desires and fears, even if they aren't consciously aware of them themselves, because most people aren't. Now, really important, I'm going to talk about this a bunch. The way most people fuck this up is by trying to create pain in their market, as opposed to bringing existing pain, doubt, shame, and other nasty emotions they already have to the fore. We're not here to actually hurt the market. Instead, we want to use our stories to evoke pain that the market, the avatar, the prospect already is feeling inside themselves, though they might not be admitting it to themselves. We want them to be able to see themselves in this and to feel their own insecurities tickled by the story. For instance, the key thing about the punch in the gut method is that we need to hit them where they are sensitive and where it hurts. We need to hit our prospects in those kind of primal insecurities insecurities, as I suppose we could call them, things that they are insecure about already in some way. An example I give for this sometimes is if somebody tried to punch me, Chris Haddad, into the gut by telling me how short I am, it wouldn't work at all because I'm 6'1", and I also have incredible core muscles that may be covered in fur, but they are really, really strong. Somebody coming up to me and saying, Chris, you're so short, isn't going to land on me in any way. They can try to tell me how short I am over and over again. They can try to cut me off on the knees, but I'm simply not sensitive about that already. I don't have any insecurities about my height already. Or if somebody tried to make me feel insecure about being bald, that wouldn't work on me either. When I see ads for Rogaine and things like that talk about how, people are staring at your hairline. I mean, I haven't felt insecure about my hairline in 20 something years now because I have a perfectly shaped skull, and with my mustache, I look like a cartoon strongman, and that's kind of awesome. I like being bald. Therefore, there's no pig story in the world about being a bald man and that being insecure about that could have any effect on me whatsoever. Also, if you want to hear a funny story, go check out the one where Patrick Stewart talks about how they wanted him to wear a wig at first when he auditioned to be Captain Picard. Didn't last very long. That said, I am insecure about all sorts of things because I'm a regular human being just like you. So if somebody actually had a story that in some way keyed into my own feelings of being an imposter and a fraud, which is something all writers and successful people have beneath our confident veneer, except for the sociopaths because they're broken, I may well end up curled up in the fetal position, begging my wife to bring me jelly beans so I feel better. I personally, just like you, have all sorts of insecurities. I have insecurities about not being as good at this whole copywriting and marketing thing as people think I am. I have insecurities about not being as good of a husband or a man as I think I should be. I have insecurities about my mental health, et cetera, et cetera. And all of those could be potential fuel for some kind of pig story that could apply to me. Another way to think about it would be, instead of creating an emotion, you're not trying to create pain in the market. You're not trying to paint a whole new painting. You're trying to restore a painting. You're trying to take the feelings, the insecurities, the pain, the doubt, the shame that your prospect in your market already has. And we're trying to, make the details of the painting sharper and more exquisitely detailed. We're brightening the colors as opposed to painting a new painting from scratch. The image, the emotion, the doubt, the pain, the fear, the hope, all of the emotional soup that we all live in is already there. But we're using our pig story to reveal it to the mind of the prospect in a way they never could themselves. And we're doing it in a very non-aggressive way. We'll talk about this a bit later. You orientation is a thing that you hear about all the time in copywriting. You're going to learn these amazing things in this course, which you're hopefully going to learn all sorts of amazing things in this. Harlan Kilstein, a good friend of mine, posted about the U orientation on Facebook years ago, and he said, the U orientation must be had in every aspect of your copy. And I agree with that 90% of the time. But when I'm telling this story, I'm always using a me orientation. I'm talking about me as the narrator, as the character, as the hero of the story, because it's less aggressive. And we'll talk about that a bit more as we go forward. So let's use good old Homer and Bart here as a bit of an example about the kinds of emotions that we are trying to evoke here. And we're going to talk about the emotions that all fathers have for their sons. And again, you're not special and that's awesome. I'm not a father myself, but I've used these particular emotions of feeling ashamed of not being looked up to by your son many times in my copy, which you'll see as we go through the course. So Homer, of course, is classically and famously disrespected by Bart. And while Homer is the very definition of not being self-aware, by using the methods I'm going to teach you later in this module, we know that deep inside it gnaws at him that he is not respected by Bart. He sees how Flanders, for instance, kids look up to him, admire him, and even idolize him. And there's that whole episode where Bart looks up to Flanders, and it causes Homer tremendous pain to see the respect that Homer wants being given to another man, which is why Homer's jealousy, which manifests as contempt for Flanders, is so incredibly believable. Homer spends a ton of time making fun of Flanders, trying to make his life miserable, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's not Homer being mean to somebody that he sees as inferior in this case. It's Homer trying to make himself feel bigger than somebody he knows deep in his heart is actually superior to him as a man and as a father. Homer will never admit it, and if you asked him, he would deny it until the day he dies, but he desperately wants what Flanders has. He wants Bart to admire him. He wants Bart to want to be like him and to follow in his footsteps, because that's really what almost all fathers wants. Because you're not special and I am not special and Homer is not special either, which is key key to the whole pig method. We're going to talk about it over and over and over again. You're going to get so sick of me saying you're not special, and that's awesome, but I'm going to drill it into your mind no matter how hard I have to try. So if we, for instance, were able to come up with a pig story about a man who is similar to Homer, someone Homer can recognize himself in, somebody who is demographically similar to Homer, has the same amount of money per se, about the same age, same race, etc., who has a moment of crisis where he realizes his son doesn't consider him a real man, but then goes on a journey that ends with the boy admiring that man, we can sell Homer pretty much anything. If we had a story, for instance, about, a little boy watching his father have to, get fired in front of him, and his father has to beg for his job. And we talked about the father looking into his own son's eyes and seeing shame, and his son looks away from him while this other man, his boss, who he hates, has power over him. For somebody like Homer, or anybody who has ever felt inferior or like their own son doesn't respect them or look up to them, that can be incredibly powerful. We'll show some of those kind of stories later. So pig stories are stories that cause immediate primal emotional impact and pain, that purge your target market's mind of all thought because they are emotionally engaged. Again, the conscious thought, rational thought is kind of the enemy of what we're trying to accomplish here. They spark a rabid need to find out what happens next in the story, curiosity to see, hey, where the hell is this going to go? Is the worst thing that can my big nightmare actually going to happen? Create a tremendous sense of empathy and make you a whole bunch of money if you're into that. The very first line of your pig story, which is a dramatization of the moment of crisis of the pig story, which we'll go into in Module 2, is designed to, punch the prospect in the gut by reflecting their own doubts, insecurities, hopes, fears, and dreams. For instance, say, he kissed me like his sister. And I knew I was alone again from my own make him worship you offer. That opening line, which we'll talk about in a lot more detail later, really just brings to fore all of the insecurities and fears and terrors that every single woman in that market has gone through. We want that punch in the gut to hit them so hard that all conscious thought flees their mind, and curiosity, in a sense, the hero is just like me, but maybe worse, force them to watch the video or read more. Now, the important part that most people miss when they try to rip off my stuff, though, is the empathy aspect of it. A lot of people, when they try to do a Chris Haddad type letter, they just have tremendous drama. They have I got stabbed in the stomach and I fell over and there was blood everywhere, etc., which isn't how I do these things at all. I was talking to Pauline Langdon, who's a good friend of mine and a former student of mine for my Escape Hatch course, about this the other day. And she was saying that what most people seem to get wrong when they're trying to write something kind of like what I do is they focus too much on punching them in the gut, but not enough on the soothing, empathetic, I love you, I like you, I'm going to take care of you aspect of it. The way that she said it was, it's about punching them in the gut with one hand while patting them on the back and reassuring them that it's all going to be okay with the other one. And no, just saying it's all going to be okay won't do the job. We're going to talk about how to evoke emotion more powerfully than that later. So again, this is not about shock value. We're not just trying to so many letters these days open with just the most dramatic nuclear bomb kind of thing, somebody going to the hospital, etc. But you'll notice a lot of my stories are actually kind of boring if you just break down what happens. It's more about the emotional aspects of how all of that is communicated. So we want to cause pain or evoke pain, bring forward pain they already have, but also make the prospect feel safe, that they can go down the path of the story with us, etc. Just making the pain bigger is what we're doing here. You have to think scalpel, not bone saw. There's a lot of subtlety to doing this the right way, and a lot of people do it the wrong way by trying to use a rubber mallet or something where a tiny little penknife will do the job. It's like you're a surgeon. A surgeon is someone who causes you to heal by cutting you with a knife in the exact right place. You're not just hacking away. So, okay. Really, really important thing that hopefully you have heard many, many times by now in your marketing career. If you haven't, you have to go back and do some more reading. As the great Mark Twain, who was a copywriter well before he was an author, or at least a famous author, famously said, "We buy on emotion, but justify with logic." Let's say it again over and over and over again, because this one little golden nugget here is the entire reason I've been successful as a copywriter. We buy on emotion, but justify with logic. I read an interview ages ago. Occasionally I Google myself, right? I look up Chris Haddad copywriter to see what people are saying. Sometimes they say I'm a massive asshole. Sometimes they get really weirded out because I'll comment on the Reddit thread and they're like, "Oh my God, you're actually here." It's hilarious. But I read an interview with somebody, I think he was a copywriter on a podcast or something, and my name had come up. And he said something along the lines of like, hey, look at Chris Haddad's stuff. If you break down Chris's letters, a lot of them don't make any logical sense at all, but they sell like crazy because they make emotional sense. And that really is, I think, the secret to my particular success. If you really broke down the nuts and bolts of the logic chain of a lot of my stuff, it kind of can fall apart a little bit. But when you're watching it, when you're hearing the copy or reading the copy, you're so emotionally engaged in it. And I'm tickling your emotions so powerfully that it kind of drags you along anyway. But again, here we go. This is the whole thing this entire course is built on. We buy on emotion, but justify with logic. Every single purchase you have ever made has been an emotional purchase. I don't care what it is. You may think that you've made the most logical choice possible, but I guarantee you are wrong. It has been emotional in some way or another. Every single decision you've made, from who you marry to where you go to school to even buying this course or wanting to spend time with me in this way, has been an emotional decision, even if you are not a particularly emotional person. I guarantee you this is true. And it's a really important thing to get deep into your mind before we go any further. The best way I've seen this described is actually in the movie Crazy People, starring the late, great, and usually drunk Dudley Moore. I love this movie. I watched it way too many times when I was a kid. In Crazy People, Dudley plays an advertising executive who has a mental breakdown and starts creating quote-unquote truthful ads instead of all the creative stuff brand-focused advertising firms worry about all the time. And you can see some of those ads on your screen right now. They're pretty funny. There's the buy Volvos, they're boxy, but they're good ad. There's the Quaker Oats ad that says, Quaker Oats, does this cereal taste great? Who knows, but at least the box is cute. And there's United, most of our passengers get there alive. I was always kind of amazed that somehow they got all of these mainstream companies to agree to actually have their products in this movie. I really can't see that happening these days, but hey, it's pretty awesome that they did. And those ads are super funny. They really are. They're great. They're hilarious. But there was one ad in there that to me really does cut through to the actual truth in advertising concept. I mean, boxy but good, yeah, that's not really going to sell anything. That's not really getting to the emotional reason that people want to buy a car. You know, the United thing about getting there on time. Most of our people get there. That's not really getting there. They were not really, fulfilling their own promise. But there is one ad that has stuck with me for many, many years. And I think those of you who have actually seen this movie in the past might understand what I'm going to talk about, because I love this ad. And that ad is Jaguar. Or Jaguar, for men who like hand jobs from beautiful women they hardly know. Beautiful, right? Beautiful. If you ask most men why they would buy a Jaguar or a Maserati or really any kind of sports car besides, denying they have small penises, they'll give you all sorts of reasons having to do with the power of the engine and the way the car grips the road, or they'll say like, I deserve it because I'm successful, or, it's a way to show the world that I have arrived in some way. But really, that's all bullshit. Every logical reason they're going to give you for why they actually buy some hot and fancy car is crap. And I'm sure there are those of you in the audience right now watching this program right now who have sports cars, and you may think that you had really good reasons to get it, but you really didn't. It's all bullshit. The real reason guys buy sports cars is 100% emotional. It's because they want to have sex with beautiful women and also show they have a bigger financial dick than their brother-in-law. And that's what I want to teach you how to do in this course. I want to teach you how to cut through all the bullshit, cut through all the conscious ideas people have about why they buy things, and get to the deep, primal emotional triggers that actually cause somebody to take out their credit card and give you money, which is a hard thing to get somebody to do, right? It's almost a magical thing. When I first got into marketing and copywriting 16, 17 years ago now, I was amazed by the idea that I could just really write something at my tiny little 13-inch MacBook or PowerBook back in the day and have money come flooding in. It was freaking awesome. So the way I'm going to teach you to make the emotional sale with a smattering of logic so the prospect can justify their purchase is, of course, with stories, because as I'm going to talk about more in a minute, stories are the operating system of the human mind. Stories are how we have evolved to learn. Stories are how we have evolved to pass on knowledge, how we have evolved to pass on morals and ethics and ideas, all sorts of things. So important thing number one, which I'm going to hammer into you over and over again in this course, almost as much as I'm going to say you are not special and that's awesome, is that stories that multiply conversions are never about what happens. They're about how what happens emotionally impacts and changes the hero or the narrator or protagonist of the story. I'm going to use the word hero over and over again. Just know that when I say hero in this case, I am talking about the narrator or the person who is the subject of the story, the protagonist of the story per se. Hero is just a really easy way of saying that. It'll make more sense later. So you'll notice as we go through our examples that the beats of the story don't really need to be all that intrinsically dramatic. Sometimes a chipped nail can be more powerful than a car crash if you know how to surf the emotional waves that are involved. The emotional wave we are trying to create is one where the hero of the story has a moment of crisis where they almost lose everything, fall into a place of almost despair where they make a choice whether they give up or take their destiny into their own hands, and then are brought to the surface and achieve the big dream due to the secrets and magic they discover along their journey. And all those terms are going to come up later, but don't worry about it right now. We want to create such a powerful sense of empathy that the prospect feels like they are the hero going on this journey, to experience the devastation of almost failing, to feel the joy of achieving the big dream, and to buy the product so they can hold on to that feeling of success and joy, whether they ever actually use the product or not. Momentum. The idea is the wave picks them up without them actually having to do anything. When somebody is experiencing Pig Story, they shouldn't feel like they are having to work to go along. They should feel like they are simply on a wave being brought into the shore, and the shore, of course, is where they give you money to prevent themselves from having to give up that feeling of joy and accomplishment. A good Pig Story, when somebody hears it or reads it, should feel like they have actually had all of the emotions of the hero along the way. The story really ends with the hero having achieved their biggest dream due to the product or the creation of the product. And then we want to create this tension in the prospect where they say, hey, I want to hold on to that feeling of success, that feeling of future pacing, that feeling of having achieved what I really, really want in this niche. So let's take a look at some of my own pig stories that have pulled in mountains of moolah and changed my life forever in mostly positive ways. I honestly suck at all sorts of things when it comes to marketing and copywriting. I am allergic to research, and I have the level of focus of a ferret on cocaine, but my copy converts super duper well because of what you'll learn here. So hopefully this will help illustrate a little bit what I'm talking about. The very first time I used what would become the pig method was for a product called Power for Home. My buddy Chris Fox asked me to do a rewrite of his existing letter, which was doing okay. He called me up. We made a deal. I rewrote it in like 6 hours or so. I think we talked on a Tuesday, and by Wednesday or Thursday, I actually had the copy over to him. Just went through the entire thing, rewrote it soup to nuts. Didn't even look at the product, quite honestly. I just took what was in the existing letter and rewrote it in kind of a had-ad style for the actual pitch. But when they put it up, it just about doubled the conversions of the letter. So it became a ClickBank #1 for a long time. I personally made, I think, $300,000 or more on that letter because I had a relatively small piece of it. It was really nice, making like $1,000 a day on that letter for a lot of time. I talked to Chris about it recently, and he was like, man, I paid you too much. And then he laughed and said, no, I didn't pay you too much at all. So why was it that I was able to almost double conversions on that letter so quickly? A friend of mine, who's actually one of the owners of a competing offer in that niche, I forget what it was called, another Power from Home kind of offer, hired my good friend and a fantastic copywriter himself named Vin Montello to look at both letters. And Vin said something like, what I was told is, Hadad is kicking your ass because your letter is about saving money, and his letter, or Chris's letter, is about a man protecting his family. And that really is, I think, the easiest way to kind of describe how pig stories really work. It's not about the feature or even the shallow benefit of things. It's not about saving money on electricity. My letter is not about saving money on electricity at all, even though some of the emails and such, that's how we kind of get people into the letter in the first place. But the benefit, the way we translate the benefit from something basic like saving money to something that tickles the primal triggers installed into us by evolution, is why that letter converted so incredibly well, because we were going after, 50-year-old plus white men, conservative men who have a real idea about what masculinity is and what a man is. And we're making this story not about a guy who's like, hey, I saved power and really screwed over the electric company, to a man who saved his daughter, who saved his family, a man who was able to really be a man. Saving money is weaved throughout this letter, but the real promise there is that you will be an island of light in a sea of darkness and will protect your family. This is the letter with the famous Daddy, I'm cold line that people bring up all the time. You will, of course, have access to that letter and a bunch of other ones in the bonuses section of this course. So that is the emotional hook that drives the entire letter. Daddy, I'm cold. The idea of a man protecting his family, a man seeing his daughter in pain and feeling helpless to protect her. It brings up envy in a powerful way. Now, folks will be pounding down your door in the, this is what we're trying to actually communicate, this idea. The letter brings up envy in a powerful way, Folks will be pounding down your door in the apocalypse, what the letter says, but you will turn them away because you were prepared and they weren't. It also brings up pride at being a real man who protects his family, which is incredibly important to men in our target market and age, race, political beliefs, etc. I think I just kind of said that 3 times, but hopefully it gets through. But the core idea here is this letter is not about saving money on power, not remotely, even though that, of course, is said over and over again. That is a benefit we hit. But really, the emotional journey of this is about a man who felt like he was failing to protect his family. And then because of the journey he went on to actually save money on power and create his own electricity, he was able to protect his family and feel like more of a man than he did before. So here's another one, how to capture his heart and make him love you forever. I was at Underground 5 many years ago when we were just about to launch Capture His Heart. And this was when I was really, really sick with Lyme disease, which you'll hear about in another video in this course. And I could barely muster an hour or 2 of work every day, if that. I became a basement troll, as my friend Emma said. I kind of just hung out in the basement all day, slept 16 hours a day, learned how to play drums because I had nothing else to do. So being really sick at the time and being a big and famous copywriter and all, I decided with Capture His Heart that instead of doing the hard work like I normally would for a letter, I would just get all lazy and rely on all the tricks of the trade I learned over the years instead of doing the real work and truly empathizing with the prospect. So, I created kind of a standard hypey, benefit-oriented, shallow benefit-oriented kind of letter. It was about, hi, my name is Claire Casey. In the next 3 minutes, I'm going to teach you, 3 magic words you can use to make a man chase you forever, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It was okay. So anyway, I was at Underground 5 when we were about to launch this thing. This was back when every single offer I was putting out was just breaking records right out of the box, getting incredible conversions over and over again. And I asked my friends Mark Ling and Jordan Hall to test out the offer as well as mailing it to my own list of about 100,000 women. This was 3 days before our official launch. I just wanted to get some early data so I could use it to kind of hype it up to the rest of the affiliates. And honestly, to my standards, when we mailed it to our list, it bombed. We only got a 2% conversion rate, which isn't bad, depending on what kind of traffic source you're getting. But for me at that point in my career and with the way the kind of traffic we were used to getting, 2% was bullshit to me. I was used to getting at least double that, sometimes 3 or 4 times that. So I was at Underground 5, and I remember looking on my computer and seeing the data, and Mark Lang had sent me, it's doing okay, and I freaked the hell out. I actually ran over to the local Best Buy. I have no idea why I didn't get a cab. I bought the last Blue Yeti microphone they had. I told my assistant who was at the conference with me to bring meat and water and meet me at my hotel room, and I rewrote and re-recorded the first half of that entire VSL in just a few hours. Just tore out the entire first half. Now, important to note, I didn't change the offer or the pitch of the VSL at all. I just changed the first 10 or 12 minutes before the product was revealed. The lead, basically the story aspect of it. So the original, as I said, opened with the standard, hi, I'm Claire Casey, and in this short video, which will not be up for long, I'm going to teach you how to capture a man's heart, make him love you forever, even if he barely pays attention to you now, which of course is a benefit. Sure, it's a thing that the women in our market want. We know the idea of having a man want you and only you forever is a very powerful desire they have. We know that works for subject lines, etc. But then I decided, okay, what can I do that's going to be a more powerful, more primal kind of story? What can be the story that fulfills the deep fantasy these women actually have? And I thought about it for a while, and I thought about romance novels, because romance novels are basically porn for women, right? And romance novels are always about a kind of regular, everyday girl who was able to land the alpha male who can have any woman he wants, and then using some kind of magical idea is able to get him to want her and only her forever. So I said, okay, this is a not a Michael Fiore product, but it's a digital romance product. I don't want to have the woman who we had recording the voiceover do it because we have so little time. I'm going to do the voiceover myself. What if I took Michael Fiore, who is portrayed by me, who the people in our market see as kind of an alpha male? They see Michael Fiore, because they don't know the real Chris Haddad, as this kind of perfect man in some way. So what if I could make the story about a player named Michael Fiore who was tamed by a regular woman who had learned the secrets to capture a man's heart from our guru, Claire Casey, even though the story was from my POV, was the POV of Michael Fiore talking about how he had been, a player, sleeping with a lot of women, doing the things that young men who had suddenly started making some money tend to do, especially when they're men who had no game whatsoever for most of our lives. And then, of course, I met a woman who ended up being my first wife, and she was able to somehow tame me from being this player. But anyway, doing it from my point of view, changing the story from I'm going to teach you how to have this benefit to a story of a regular woman who was able to take this man and get him to commit, even though he didn't have to choose her, even though she was pretty much normal. Excuse me for a second, dramatically increased the conversions. It actually quadrupled the conversions of that letter literally overnight. The weirdest thing was we'd actually had Jordan and Mark Ling mail to a piece of swipe copy that actually didn't make any sense whatsoever for the new VSL, but the traffic that was coming from that swipe copy, even though it didn't make any sense for that swipe copy to the VSL, still converted 4 times higher because of the story, because of the evolutionary hooks of the story, because it really keyed into what women, pretty much all women who are interested in any kind of relationship advice thing, want. Next, let's talk about the Pimsleur approach. My good friend Dan Reutman there. Also, you'll see that picture of me with the blue mohawk on. Angie was like, my wife, she was like, why is that picture of you from that party there? And I said, well, that's my superhero character from a crazy fun party I went to years ago who was called Blue Balls. So my superhero came in and saved Dan Reutman's VSL. He was doing just fine. Don't worry about that. Anyway, next we have the Pimsleur approach, which was one of the very last letters I ever did for a client before focusing fully on my digital romance business and becoming the copywriter you could not hire for any price, because freelancing kind of sucks. If you're a freelancer, it still kind of sucks. Sorry to tell you. Anyway, Dan Reutman asked me to rewrite the VSL for his $10 front end for his, I believe at the time it was like a $40 million a year business. I may well be wrong. Dan, if you're watching this somehow, please let me know. So the control they had was actually pretty good. They built a really good language learning business off it, but it's up to the practical benefit. That letter was really about you will be able to learn a language fast, even though you are an adult, and it's supposed to be hard for adults to learn a new language. And I used all of that in my rewrite. The core idea of the mechanism of that entire concept is that actually, you might have been told it's harder for adults to learn a language than it is for children to learn a language, but you're actually completely wrong. It turns out that actually learning a language as an adult is easier if you know this technique. That part stayed the same, but then I made it into a story-oriented VSL where we dug deeper into the secret emotional reasons you want to learn a language when you are older, which are so you can feel smart and special, superior to all those monolingual Americans, and have a passionate affair with a hot French guy who was astonished at your mastery of the language of love. Again, the emotions we're bringing up are not like, you will be able to speak a language so you can get a job in France or whatever else, these kind of practical, kind of dry things. The benefit was feeling superior to other men and women, feeling superior to other Americans who people around the world in Europe kind of look down on because we're so incurious and not well-traveled and only speak one language. And by making it about that idea of feeling superior, having the envy of other people, feeling pride in some way, having, handsome foreign men coming after you, because it was a woman who was the narrator of the VSL, we got a 20% boost in conversions, which may not sound like much compared to what we talked about for the last two, but still, Dan told me recently that he and his team were never able to beat that control all the way up until he sold the company, and it led to many, many, many tens of millions of dollars of additional sales. I did not charge him enough, but that's okay. Then there's my language of desire letter, where I use my talk dirty to me, he said in our 1-year anniversary line to bring all women's massive anxiety about being not sexy enough, cool enough, or just enough in general to rocket a dirty talk offer to the ClickBank top 5 for something like 4 years, even though I never changed a word of the VSL after we launched it, which I look back on now and I'm like, oh my God, that's absolutely ridiculous. But like I said, I was really sick at the time. That picture you see there is me in Florida at Lyme disease sleepaway camp. I was stuck in Florida for 7 months getting Lyme disease treatment. That is actually me during the launch of Language of Desire with an IV in my arm while I am running that launch. So the reason it worked so well is because I used the pig method to dramatically illustrate and encapsulate a woman's deepest fear without forcing them to admit to themselves yet that they are experiencing these emotions at all. Imagine for a second if I said, if you're like most women, you probably feel like you aren't sexy enough for your man. By using the traditional you orientation in that way, we actually put the prospect on the back foot into a defensive posture because they're not willing to admit to anyone, including themselves, they have this anxiety in the first place. They kind of feel like, well, who the fuck are you to think that you know me in some way? So with the pig method, with the pig story, we're able to show them another woman who is just like them, but worse, experiencing their own greatest nightmare in a way they can empathize with without feeling emotionally exposed themselves. We are punching them in the gut and evoking all their existing unconscious anxiety while still making them feel safe enough to continue on in the story because they are not feeling attacked. We're not talking about them. We're talking about somebody who is just like them. Next, we have my friend Todd Lamb's 21 flat belly fix offer, 21-day flat belly fix offer that crawled its way to the top of ClickBank because I focused the story to be about one man's mission to save his crippled wife, triggering feelings of pride in men who watched the video and feelings of protection and admiration in women so they felt connected to Todd and wanted to buy his stuff. The traditional way of writing a story for this kind of product would be about a woman looking in the mirror, feeling bad about how she looks in a bikini. And that can work. You know, I want to be able to fit in my hot jeans from when I was a teenager. But we went deeper here and changed losing weight and having a flat belly to regaining your pride, power, self-esteem as a woman, and even health. And also making it about a man who is going to hell as a warrior to protect the woman in his life. This is a thing that women look up to in general. Women love men who are willing to be a warrior for their man, men who are willing to sacrifice to save the woman in his life. Todd and his wife were both cops at the time. While his wife was incredibly athletic, she got into a car wreck that destroyed her body and took her ability to exercise away from her. Without being able to exercise, she lost not just her body, but her identity and gained a ton of weight and became a person neither of them recognized. This caused a tremendous stress in their marriage and sent Todd on a mission to figure out how to rescue his wife, how a man should rescue his wife according to the unconscious worldview of the market. Again, this is what women want. Women are our target market. In this case, we really make Todd into a wonderful, admirable kind of man, the kind of man they wish their husbands were. So on his journey, he discovered a method that allowed his wife to lose weight without exercising, which took his wife out of her depression, gave her the energy and self-esteem she needed to do the rehab she needed to, and saved their marriage. Suddenly, the product isn't just about losing weight and having abs. It's about survival and having the marriage most women can only dream of. We are positioning this product not just like you're going to have a flat belly, but you're going to have your man being as profoundly dedicated to protecting you as Todd was to protecting his beautiful wife. Cool, huh? So let me explain the simple reason that pig method of crafting stories sucks cash out of your prospects' pockets like a nuclear-powered vacuum cleaner. The nuclear-powered vacuum cleaner thing, by the way, was a line that I used in my one-way spikes of doom letter that I wrote back when I was in Harlan Kilstein's mentoring group years and years ago. Anyway, the fact is that a ravenous hunger for stories is built into each of us at a deep evolutionary level. I talked about this very briefly before. All throughout human history, stories are how we've passed down knowledge, communicated values, and foundational myths to our children, and are the actual backbone human society is built on even before we had anything resembling written language. This is why we spend so much time and money on stories now, whether they be novels, comic books, movies, TV shows, or even committing emotional suicide by bathing ourselves themselves in a constant onslaught of cable news. Throughout history, stories in the form of religion and mythology are how we have made sense of the confusing chaos of the world. They're how we have built religions, raised armies, justified genocide and slavery, and become the toxic masters of this very planet where we've pretty much destroyed the entire planet in 150 years. Pretty awesome. In other words, tell someone facts and they'll forget them. Tell them a story that has the facts in it or just what you want to convince them are facts, and it will bore deep into their emotional heart, and they'll remember them forever, even if they're bullshit. By the way, Wired for Story by Lisa Cron. Very good book. I recommend it. Go check it out. If you tell me a story that echoes me and my emotions, I will feel like I am you and will experience the trials, the tribulations, the terror, and the eventual success of the main character as if it had actually happened to me. When the story ends and our hero has achieved the big dream, I will feel like I have achieved the big dream as well and will feel anxiety that I need to buy the product in order to hold on to that amazing feeling. When I use the right emotional language to tell the story about the terror I felt in my car wreck, you feel that terror as if it's happening to you right there in the moment. Bringing you to that emotional place allows me to lift you up when I tell the story of fixing my body over almost 2 decades. This is why we want happy endings in stories, because we feel like we are the main character, and if the story ends in tragedy, we will feel like the tragedy has happened to us. In our pig stories, we always give the hero a happy ending and install a need in the prospect to have that happy ending as well by buying our stuff. And when I say emotional language, I don't mean you just say, I was in pain. I mean, you show me your pain by showing me what's going on inside your mind and your heart, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So important thing number 2. Humans evolved to be pattern-seeking and story-seeking animals, and they're pretty much the same thing, actually. Stories are patterns that we see in the world. We tend to see conspiracies, by the way. But humans can't help but look for patterns and find structure in the information coming our way. The neocortex, which is the outermost layer of the brain, is found only in mammals and is responsible for humans' ability to recognize patterns. A huge part of the human mind is dedicated just to processing faces. This pattern-seeking software is so powerful that it can trick us into seeing anything with eyes and a mouth as a face, say a cloud or a typewriter or anything that you see out in the world. If there are 2 eyes and something that looks like a mouth and maybe a nose, you will see a face there whether you want to or not. It's just human nature. It's why cars actually have faces for a reason. They design them that way on purpose to give the car kind of an attitude or a personality. The problem is our story-devouring minds and pattern-seeking brains combine to create conspiracy theories, misinformation, etc. Once that happens, confirmation bias takes over and we actively try to find patterns that confirm our narrative. Now, this happens to everybody, no matter how smart or how stupid you are. You are not immune either. But we can use this confirmation bias and other cognitive biases in our copy and stories to further create feelings of being just like you. Again, all of this comes down to how we evolve. I'm going to talk about evolution over and over again. If you don't believe in evolution and you're taking this course, I got nothing for you. This is just how I see the world and how I do things. So, just pretend that you do. Just pretend that you believe in evolution while you're doing this course and see what happens. I think you'll make more sales that way. But anyway, even if you've never seen a snake in your life, if you see one right now, you will freak out and be scared due to a kind of genetic memory. It's been bored into us by evolution over the millennia to be scared of snakes or things that look like snakes. If you see something that looks like a snake out of the corner of your eye, like a garden hose, you'll have the same problem. If you are like most human beings, you will see that out of the corner of your eye and you will freak out a little bit the same way if you saw kind of a tiger coming towards you. It's not something we choose and it's not rational because humans are not rational. This is why banishment is so painful to humans, because all throughout history, being without a tribe was a death sentence, which is why even now the idea of being banished or FOMO, fear of missing out, or being kept out of the group in some way is so tremendously painful to us. Because once upon a time, being outside of the group would actually get you killed. It was evolutionarily advantageous to have it built into us, into our emotions, to never want that. This is why children are afraid of the dark, because all throughout history, being away from the fire in the dark would probably get you eaten. The dark is actually quite frightening to children for a reason. There are wolves out there. There are monsters out there. There are people who are not like you out there. Your prospects are all irrational, and you and I are too, which is why we're so susceptible to cognitive biases. What this means is what we want, what motivates us, and what terrifies us has nothing to do with our logical brains at all, and everything to do with our unconscious minds and the hopes and fears that have been installed into us over millennia of evolution. So, important thing number 3, we're about to end this video. We have no choice whatsoever when it comes to what persuades us to take action in what we rabidly desire. Eben Pagan used to talk about this in his David D'Angelo stuff. He would say, attraction is not a choice. And that's true. What I am attracted to as a man, what women are attracted to is not something we choose whatsoever, because we are not rational creatures. We do not choose what we are attracted to or what we want. Evolution chose that for us a long time ago. Men find butts and boobs attractive because they are evolutionary signals of reproductive fitness, plain and simple. Women find tall, handsome, high-status, rich men who are doing things that have a mission in their life attractive because historically those men could protect them, have sexy genes that will pass down, and will have the resources and power to ensure the survival of kids. It's not because they want to find that attractive. This is kind of why, women always say, why do I find jerks so attractive? Well, jerks are attractive because they have genes that are going to go out in the world and, do cool shit in some way. Even with women who do not want kids have this deep in their programming, just like men who don't want kids still find a hot ass really attractive. And I'm very glad we live in a world with a higher level of equality between the sexes, but this stuff is still in there. It's still the evolutionary operating system of our minds. And if we ignore it and try to logic our way into the sale, we will fail every single time. So that's the end of video number 1. It was a big one, right? Lots and lots of stuff. I hope you survived the experience. May want to watch it again. Hopefully it all made sense. No homework yet for this one, but you might want to go take a shower, get a good nap, maybe play a video game or write a loving letter to your grandmother, because next we're going to dive into the deep irrational desires of your market. It's going to be fun. Bye.